But on this particular day, I just said, you know what, Mom, like I've had enough. I don't need this. I'm just going to go back home. And
Okay.
so I left and I lived 2.5 hours away. And I didn't say anything else. I remember getting about an hour from my house and my phone started ringing. My brother called me. I had a sister that called me. The house called me, and I just didn't answer. I was like, you know what? Nope. I've committed to this. I'm
Mhm.
I'm going all the way. And I had so many regrets already in that moment because I wanted to see my family. I didn't see them super often. But I was like, no, I made the choice to leave. I'm going to leave. Well, my mom didn't know that I had actually left the house. She thought I was just frustrated and angry. She didn't know where I was. And so no one knew where I was for several hours.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. As a woman who spent years chasing praise, perfection, and productivity, Kylie knows what it's like to look put together on the outside while hiding chaos on the inside. Now a certified Catholic mindset coach, spiritual director, and host of the Persistence in Prayer podcast, she helps overwhelmed Catholic women clear the mental clutter so they can hear God and live with peace and clarity in the present moment. Through her Marian-inspired Living Yes framework, Kylie guides women to release perfection and performance and rediscover their worth as beloved daughters of God. Now, before we hear from Kylie, have you checked out the nonprofit I'm starting? Please go to kofi.com/warrior words for all the details. And that is Kofi, KO-FI/warrior words. Well, wait, kofi.com, and I'll have that link, I'll put the link in the show notes. Now, grab a tissue and join Kylie and me as she shares about how harsh words with a loved one changed the trajectory of her life. Let's rock. Hi, everyone. We are blessed to have Kylie Hein with us here today. Welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Kylie.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. It's such a blessing and a privilege to be here with you.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for giving up your time because we are recording this during Thanksgiving week. And I know it's a busy, busy week for a lot of us. But I also know that Thanksgiving week is an important part of your story. So, can you take us back to that one specific Thanksgiving and share your story with us?
Absolutely. So it was Thanksgiving of 2011, and we had actually already celebrated briefly Thanksgiving at my sister's house, but it wasn't the whole family, and it was a great, enjoyable, fun day. But that Saturday after Thanksgiving was when the whole family got together. So all of my siblings would gather at my parents' house, and all of the nieces and nephews and everyone would come together. It was always a good time and a time when I could really just be in the presence of my loved ones.
Mhm.
But this year I was particularly struggling. I was a high school math teacher at a very large Catholic school. I was in my second year of teaching. And I don't know about you, but I am a striver, a perfectionist, a high achiever. I want the praise. I want to do all of the things
Mhm.
right and I want to do them well. And so that's a tough thing to do as a teacher. Anyone who's in the education world can tell you that there are so many expectations that are put on you from parents, from students,
Yeah.
from administration, from yourself. And
Yeah.
when you're only 23, that's a lot to try to manage when you haven't been given all of the skills that you need to manage your emotions and manage all of that chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So I was someone who, from the outside, probably looked like I had it all put together and I had things going the way that they needed to be going and I was on top of it. But inside, I was a mess. And in all of my 13 years of teaching, I would always say Thanksgiving break was usually how long I could make it before the tears would start to come and I would have the the interior frustration would start to come out through my eyeballs
Mm.
because it
Yeah.
just got to be too much. So I remember that happening that year. I coached volleyball, just a side note, I coached volleyball during the fall,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the summer prep work kind of carried me through volleyball season. But once volleyball got over in October, then we got close toward the end of the semester, and there were just more pressures, especially in a subject like math, which is what I taught, and things just started to pile up. So I came home wanting this relaxing Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
wanting to ignore all of my problems and just de stress, but also coming home with a giant stack of paperwork and expectations and things that needed to be done. So, on this particular Saturday after Thanksgiving, I just wanted to be, I wanted to, distract myself with a movie. And my mom wanted me to come help in the kitchen and clean. And preparing for holidays in my house was always chaos. It wasn't always clean. There were things that had to be put away because we just lived a very fast paced life.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to take on that responsibility because at 23, I'm like, I don't live here anymore. I
Yeah.
didn't really want to do all of that, but my mom wanted help. And so I finally, already being frustrated, went to the kitchen to help her. And I remember we were arguing. She was putting away dishes. And the last straw, that thing that just puts you over the top. You're already frustrated. And then it's
Yeah.
like that one little thing, something so small just makes you snap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing that made me snap was lumpy brown sugar. I couldn't find the things that I needed to make the chocolate chip cookies that I was supposed to be making. And the brown sugar, somehow, maybe the lid wasn't on all the way. There was something that
Yeah.
just made it lumpy and it wasn't great for cooking. And so I started arguing with my mom even more. My mom is the most peaceful person you could ever meet. And I took after my dad and had a very quick temper. So normally in this type of situation, we would have worked through it. I maybe would have just left the room for a while, went and decompressed. But on this particular day, I just said, you know what, mom, like I've had enough. I don't need this. I'm just going to go back home. And
Okay.
so I left and I lived 2.5 hours away. And I didn't say anything else. I remember getting about an hour from my house and my phone started ringing. My brother called me. I had a sister that called me. The house called me, and I just didn't answer. I was like, you know what? Nope. I've committed to this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm going all the way. And I had so many regrets already in that moment because I wanted to see my family. I didn't see them super often. But I was like, no, I made the choice to leave. I'm going to leave. Well, my mom didn't know that I had actually left the house. She thought I was just frustrated and angry. She didn't know where I was. And so no one knew where I was for several hours. That's the first part of the story. Getting back home, I eventually did talk to my mom. We had some very hard words, hard, and I remember her saying, I'm sorry you feel too good for your own family. It was
Oh,
really hard to hear.
yes.
Something that I kind of blocked out of my mind for a long time. I can look at it now and just see how prideful I had been from, being away in the city versus this rural life where I lived and how caught up I had got in all of the things of maybe feeling ashamed of where I came from, of what I had at home versus the environment I was currently in. And I talked to my mom maybe one other time, but 2 weeks later, also on a Saturday, it was about 8 a.m. I was at school helping to just watch over a room. There was a speech meet that day. And I was sitting outside my classroom and I had just opened my laptop. I was preparing a talk for a retreat that we held for our high school juniors. And the title of the talk was called The Results of God's Friendship. And
Mhm.
as I started writing that talk, my phone rang. And it was my sister saying that my mom had been life flighted and I needed to come home. So you can imagine my heart racing and dropping. My heart's racing right now, even just reliving it and sitting in
Yeah.
that moment, trying to find someone and tell them I need to leave, trying to go home and pack clothes, drive the 2.5 hours back without, stressing about what was going on. And I remember driving and just having this moment where I just knew I wasn't going to see my mom again. And no one had told me that. My siblings were like, just get here. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But she had already passed at that point. So by the time I got to the hospital and I saw my dad and he just melted
Yeah.
and actually the first words out of his mouth were, your mom didn't make it. And I know you're going to carry this with you your whole life, but I want you to know that she loved you. Because he just knew that that was the last time that I had seen her.
Yeah.
And we never think that's going to be us. We never think that's going to happen. You hear all these stories of other people who have lost loved ones, other people who have, family members with cancer, or they've been through cancer stories, or all these things. But until it actually happens to you, you never think it's going to happen to you.
Right. Yeah. And what struck me about what you just said was early on, you said that your father was very quick tempered
Hmm.
and that you got that from him. But yet, the first thing he did when he saw you was comfort you. And it seemed, I mean, I guess death does do that, shock does do that. But it was just such a striking thing that he was the one who met you and comforted you
Yeah.
and shared that peace. You know, that peace, actually, I was thinking PIECE, but it just occurred to me that he shared a little bit of PEACE with you. And
Yeah.
okay, I'm tearing up. Um, and yet you're right. You know, we never really expect that it's going to happen to us until it really does. I know that when I was diagnosed with cancer, the shock on my daughter's face when she found out was just, it's something I'll never forget because you're just going through life and you just don't think about those things.
Yeah.
So,
And we miss so much because we think it's not going to happen to us. And honestly can't really wrap our brains, I don't think, or at least I couldn't, around what it feels like when you go through it. So we can always hear those sayings and have in our mind, oh, don't take a moment for granted. But until you have a lived experience, and I think this is just the beauty of the way that God works, is that all things intention of suffering and love, right? Our greatest love often comes through the suffering. The more we grow in love of Him, the more suffering we will endure.
yes.
And that's just the way that He created us and created the world, and the way that He moves through us. His greatest saints endured the greatest suffering. And
Yeah.
so this is where, in that moment, and I remember thinking in that moment and in that time after, is this going to be a time where I move closer to God? Or is this going to be a time where I pull away from God? Because when trauma happens, one of those two things happens.
Right.
And I didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen. But God's grace showed up so abundantly, it wasn't even a choice.
Well, I think that would be the next thing that I would ask you is so you have that moment with your father and if you're anything like me, you've got those regrets running through your head, kind of at that moment that you did not get that chance to, you had conversations, but you didn't have that face-to-face opportunity. So how did it go from there, and how did God's grace show up?
When my dad said that to me, my first initial reaction was, "Oh, I hadn't even thought of that."
Oh, okay.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I had just been so focused on, "Oh my goodness, I'm not gonna see her again," but I hadn't even thought about my last encounter with her, and it actually was just over time of really revisiting that and a lot of prayer. But something that I noticed as I have just prayed with this and looked at that encounter with my mom over the years and looked at all the blessings that have come from it, because there have been so many tremendous blessings. Something that I realized, and I actually came to this conclusion when going through the 19th annotation, which is the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, is God does not reveal the depth of our sin until we know the depth of his love for us.
Mhm.
And so when I looked back at that encounter, I wasn't able to see my part in it and the depth of all of my pride in it really until I had grown so much more closer to the Lord and started to understand his love for me. And the closer that I grew to him, which I think hugely was from this experience with my mother, I started to realize how wrong I was in that moment and that it wasn't my mom, it was me. But it also just gave me such clarity on how loved by my mother I was, and how she was the person that I treated the worst because she was one of the people that I loved the most. And I knew that she
Yes.
would always
Yes.
be there. And that's what we do. We treat the people who we know are going to be there the
Yes.
worst because we know that they can see our worst and they're not going to run away.
Yeah. I've said that to my kids on a couple of occasions. Ironic that we're talking about mother-child thing here, because I have said that to them, and I've always wanted them to know that I am a safe place for them to come, whatever they have to tell me, even if they're angry, even if they're angry at me for something I did or didn't do. And so, yeah, I think we do. We really do treat people, because we treat people we love the most. We treat them the worst because of that, because we know they're safe. Yeah.
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 And
So,
so when I lost my mom, that was December 10th and of 2021. And so you can imagine we were going through the holidays, we were going into Christmas. I remember standing in Target and I was trying to buy Christmas presents for my nieces and nephews. And I went to pull out my phone and call my mom, like, hey, what would they like? And I just remember
mm,
putting everything back on the shelf, leaving the store, going to my car, and just sobbing. And I remember how difficult Christmas was that year because again, as a teacher, I had Christmas break. I came home and it was my dad and my little brother was a senior in high school. And so trying to have it all together for them to try to, uphold them. But then when I went back home by myself was usually where I was able to process a lot of my grief. And that's where it was really challenging and difficult.
yeah.
I had such great healing. I did go on the retreat and I did give my talk on the results of God's friendship. And I talked about my mom. And that was one of the moments that I have felt the most alive in my entire life. It was such a Holy Spirit moment of the way
Yeah.
that he worked through me. And it was something that eventually led to me getting my master's in ministry, pursuing more of the work that I'm doing now with coaching and spiritual direction. I was at a pivotal moment in my relationship with God because early 20s, I was a hot mess. I was a bit of a hot mess, but I was finding my way back into my faith. I'm a cradle Catholic. And being at this Catholic school and surrounded by all these incredible kids, I was really just trying to straighten out my life. And losing my mom just kind of catapulted that.
Yeah.
And just led me so much deeper. And over the years, I can look back and I can see how my relationship with Mary has truly been transformed by losing my mother. I can see all these little pieces that have led me to my husband through losing my mother. I mean, we did a memorial volleyball tournament as a fundraiser for a scholarship in honor of my mother. I randomly asked a friend to come play, and that friend is now my husband. I mean, it was just all of these
Wow.
little things, seeing how much closer my siblings and I are, and the beauty in my own family when someone's frustrated and my kids will remind them or remind me, like, hey, we're not leaving the house angry. We always say goodbye. We always
Yes.
say I love you before we leave the house. It's those little things and truly not taking any moments for granted, always finding the joy and finding God in whatever it is that we're enduring because he is always there and he makes all things beautiful.
Well, it certainly sounds like he did with you, because I'm thinking as you're sharing these things that have occurred after at direct result or indirect result of this encounter with your mother. Um, it's obvious that he did a work in you,
Hmm.
as well as then enabled you to go and do work in and for others. And that's just beautiful. And I love that, because I see that with a lot of guests that I have here on the show, that it's their trauma or their struggle that leads to doing what God wants them to do and being very successful at it because they've lived it and because God has given them the strength and the courage to move forward. Like you said, you had a choice. You could run to him or you could run from him, and he didn't seem to give you much of a choice, but you made the right one nonetheless.
Yeah. I think we always have a choice, but oh, it has just been so much grace. I mean, there are no other words to describe it because for not all of my siblings went the same direction. I have
Mm,
friends who have lost parents and they have no relationship with God because there's anger and there's resentment. And I remember a family member after my mom passed away just really struggling with why. And I think that's a question we can ask, but that wasn't a question that ever came to me. It was really just, okay, Lord, now what? And truly, that is nothing. It is not because I am a holy person. It is not because of anything with the way that my mind works. It is truly a grace, I think, that the Lord has just not brought that to the forefront of my mind to question why or to be angry because he has something that he wants me to do with all of this. He
yeah.
wants me to help people learn how to manage all of that overwhelm and that inner chaos so that we can show up from a place of love and we don't have to have those painful, hard moments. We'll have other painful, hard moments, but we don't
Right.
have to have that one.
Yes, because he what did he say? He said that he didn't come to create peace, right? He didn't come to make everything, and I'm gonna paraphrase hunky dory. Um, we're not gonna have a perfect life. He said we would struggle. He said it would be hard, but that the reward in heaven would be great.
And he also said that he wants us to live life abundantly. I mean,
Hmm.
he wants us to have joy. The way that joy looks is different when we are near him
Yes.
because it is an everlasting joy. It is a deeper peace. It is not a false sense of peace that we get when we're chasing our own fleshly desires. It's very
Right.
different,
Right.
but it's so much more beautiful.
Yes. And I think it also enables us, like you said, the difference between the question why and what now is, I think part of that is the ability to see that grace and that beauty and that joy within suffering. Because that's one of the things that I like to talk about is the fact that there is beauty in our suffering. And sometimes it's not easy to find. And sometimes we have to be way beyond it before we can see it. But there is always some kind of beauty. And you shared so many, so many with us. And actually, one that I wanted to ask about, because I know my audience is Christian,
Mhm.
but not everyone is Catholic. And so you mentioned coaching and you mentioned spiritual direction.
Yeah,
What's the difference in between the two?
such a good question. I get asked this often. So I think of coaching, spiritual direction, and therapy kind of as like a three-legged stool.
Okay.
There is overlap in all of them. They all do wonderful things, but the focus of each one is slightly different. So most people are familiar with therapy. Therapy often can do a lot of work on your past, right? So you're doing a lot of past work. We're looking at trauma, or therapy can be for someone who has a diagnosis, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Hmm.
Spiritual direction is walking with someone on their journey with God through those peaks and those valleys. And the spiritual director is not the director. We're just someone who helps you understand and see where the Lord is working in your life. The Holy Spirit is always the director. The Holy Spirit is the person who is moving you, but we don't always see ourselves clearly. In fact, we don't see ourselves as God sees us at all the majority of the time.
Yeah, yes.
And so your spiritual director just really helps you notice how God is moving in your life right now in the present moment and to discern. So there's an aspect of discernment of spirits, just understanding what is from God, what is not from God, and what is God moving you to right now. So that's spiritual direction. And then coaching, the coaching that I do, because there's all different types of coaching. I say my coaching is coaching through a Catholic lens. So you don't have to be Catholic to get coached by me. You just have to understand that that's the lens that I approach things through
Mhm.
based on my training and my background and my faith. And coaching is a little more forward facing. So we have all this inner chaos right now. What is actually going on inside? So it's like if I were to hold up a mirror to what is going on inside of Heather, so you can actually see what is all that chaos going on inside of there. What are you
Mhm.
actually thinking? What are the thought patterns that you're having? And how can we get you unstuck so you can take that next step in your God given mission without fear, but you can move forward with confidence and you can move forward with clarity that this is where God is asking you to go. This is the next step, not the next 8,000 step, but just the
Yes.
next one
Just
step. And we just set really small actionable goals, but it's learning how to slow down that thought process. So our emotions, like my anger with my mother, came from a thought that I was having,
okay.
probably a thought about myself of how I was a failure or I had too much to do, things typically about me, but it made me feel a certain way. And as a result of our emotions, we make actions.
Okay.
And so we want to make actions that grow us closer to the Lord, not actions that take us from the Lord or that are sinful. And so the coaching is just how do we slow down that super fast process that goes on in our brain in an instant because we think that emotions just happen to us, and that's not really the case. Emotions are results of our thinking, of images in our brain, and we can learn to become aware of those so that we can make better informed choices and decisions.
Okay. All right. Well, then let me follow up with saying, okay, you mentioned therapy can be used, and I think is what people generally think of used with some sort of diagnosis, whether
Mhm.
it's a mental health diagnosis or something along those lines. So how does one then decide between spiritual direction and coaching? Because I can see similar
Yeah,
similar
I
elements.
I say do both. The most transformation that I have ever had was when I was doing both side by side. Honestly, the coaching helped make me, and I had been in spiritual direction for years, I will say that. The coaching made me so much more aware of what I needed to focus on in spiritual direction, of what things I should be taking to prayer. Because often when we go to prayer, our mind is so busy, we just can't even sit still. We live in a world that is so much chaos and so much noise.
Yeah.
And so the coaching just really helps to get all of that out. It's like we're going to get all of this chaos out and just kind of set aside the things that we don't need to be worrying about. And let's just focus on what's the one thing right now that the Lord is asking me to do. And then I can take that into my prayer. And so we can rest a little more with God. So I say both, but um, if you don't have a daily prayer life, I say start there. Yeah. When you work with a spiritual director can help you kind of establish prayer rhythms and routines, but sometimes a coach can be more helpful for that. So a lot of times when people come to me for coaching, they want to start praying, they just don't know how to fit it into their day, or it seems like it always gets pushed off, or they don't know what to do when they go to pray. And so sometimes we'll actually tackle that in coaching as well.
Okay. All right. Well, that was helpful.
Yeah.
So then that leads right into, um, if somebody is interested in what you just described, how do they get spiritual direction or coaching through you?
Yeah, my website is www.kylieMhine.com. And on there, you can schedule a free confidence and clarity call. So essentially, you just hang out with me for 20 minutes. I hold space for you to just tell me what's going on and where you feel stuck. And then we can create a plan to move forward. So there's no stipulations. In fact, I don't try to pitch you anything or sell you anything. If people want to coach with me after that, then they ask. I really don't try to sell them anything. This is just a place where people can come and have space held for them to see what the best path forward is. Sometimes that is with me and sometimes it's not, and that's okay. So that's one way. You can go to my website. You can also learn a lot more about coaching on my podcast called Persistence in Prayer with Kylie Hein. And that is for overwhelmed women who want to learn how to build in those pauses to their day and really move from a place of chaos and overwhelm interiorly to a place of openness to embrace the joy that God gives them in each and every moment.
And I think that was probably my favorite line that I read in your bio was that you felt like you looked put together on the outside, but you had that chaos going on the inside that you were trying to hide with that put together look. And if coaching and or spiritual direction can help with that, then I think there's a lot of us women out there who are overwhelmed and could who could use that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
really the women I work with, like I said, they're often, you know, to others are the high achievers. They don't see themselves that way because
Mhm.
they put themselves down so much because they think that they're not doing enough. But there are so
Yes.
many lies that are rooted in there that are not from God. And so we spend a lot of time just doing that deep work, going from the head. Like in my head, I know that my worth is not rooted in how much money I make or what people say about me or how many degrees I have or certifications or achievements.
Right.
But we can know that in our head and not feel it in our heart. And so
Mhm.
that's really a lot of the work that we do is how do we move into that heart space and understand that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are God's beloved children, and that is where our worth is. Our identity is in Him, and we are more than all of our mistakes. Praise God.
Yes. Yes, praise God.
And all of our angry moments and all of our
Mhm.
regrets. We are so much more than that.
Yes, and I am so grateful that not only did God give you all of those graces, but that you were open to them and your eyes were open and you were willing to accept those graces because now as a result of this event in your life, you can now use that in your coaching and in your spiritual direction to help these women. And well, I'm grateful. I haven't been the benefit of your services maybe yet, but but no, that's just the thing that I was just thinking is that, going back to what you said about choosing to run toward or run away, you could have been closed to those graces.
Mm.
Could have ignored, you could have said, no, God, thank you very much. I really don't want to walk down this path. But you chose to be open to it and you chose to accept it. And so I think that's just amazing to me. Um, and to be honest with you, I don't know why that's amazing because I think it happens in so many of the conversations that I have, and it bears repeating and repeating and repeating that how God uses what we've been through to help us benefit others. So,
I give so much credit. I really think it goes back to my mom and her prayers. I think it has to. It has to be all the prayers that my mom, not that she didn't pray prayers for my other siblings, but I just I think it has to go back to the all the prayers that she said, all the times that she took us to church, even when my dad didn't go. Someone was praying for me. Her, I think my aunt, who's my godmother, I think of all the prayers that I know she has said for me, someone had to have been praying for me. Someone is still praying for me.
mhm.
And
Yes.
there's a lot of times where I did push away grace. I won't say that I was instantly transformed over time. I've made so many mistakes. I didn't mention this, but I lost my mom to she had a pulmonary embolism. So it was very sudden. She woke up that morning. My dad heard her fall in the bathroom. By the time the ambulance got there, she was actually already deceased. So it was very, very quick. It was very, very difficult. My little brother was the one who had to call 911. So just very traumatic. He's still, I'm sure, processing all of that, just like I'm still processing it, and my other siblings in different ways. And then in 2021, we actually lost my dad, and that was a much slower process. He had colon cancer, so we had about a year with him. And so just seeing the way that the Lord has worked through both of those instances, one that was so instantaneous, you didn't get to ask any of those last questions,
Yeah.
and one that was a slow process of watching someone suffer and endure all of the pain. But both times where I still have regrets, but also
Yeah.
both instances, or I think, why didn't I do this differently? Why didn't I ask these other questions? But both places where the Lord was just so abundantly good and just has brought so much fruit in my life that I could not have imagined if I would have thought about losing a parent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't mean to imply that it was all instantaneous and
No,
and
I know.
perfection. I just wanted, yeah, because I know, because I have balked at things, and what the mission that the Lord has given me right now is not something I ever would have chosen for myself. And in fact, I actually just had a thought earlier today. I'm like, Lord, I really would just like, can I just make a living doing this? Because I would really rather just do this. And then I was reminded, no, you've been given this mission and you need to go out and be obedient. And so yes, we do sometimes balk, we sometimes struggle, and it's not always instantaneous. But I guess I just wanted to point out that, yes, God is so good and he gives us so many graces. But if we are closed to them and we stay closed to them, then none of this, none of this happens. None of this comes to fruition. And that in and of itself, I think that is suffering. That is a shame. So again, the lesson here is be open.
Yes.
Even if it takes multiple times, be open to what God is sending you. And so I would like to, well, before I close, You had mentioned that you had something for our listeners that they could go download. Could you share a little bit about what you wanted to offer them?
Yes. So, one of the things that I walk clients through in coaching is temperaments. If you're not familiar with the four temperaments, if you get the download, it'll give you a general idea. But
Yes, I
temperaments
know
is a
mine.
is a big part of the coaching that I do. And temperament is not your identity. It's just a doorway where we can start to self-reflect and understand the way that God has created us uniquely apart from other people. And it really helps us in knowing ourselves and knowing our tendencies, but also in bettering our relationships with other people because we start to understand that their brain does not work the way that my brain works.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I have something called a daily examine for every temperament. An examine is something that you do once a day to just reflect on the graces that God has given you and the places where you struggled that you need to ask for grace tomorrow. So it's a really important part of self-reflection and just that journey to holiness and to sainthood. And so the temperament for every or examine for every temperament, what it does is for each temperament, it gives you a list of virtues or vices that you are more prone to. So, for example, vices that might come up for you more regularly. If you're a choleric, it might be pride. And then there's a whole list of things to kind of look out for, just to pay attention to things that you might not be aware of. And then the examine goes through questions of how do I look back at my day and pay attention to how I showed up in those moments with other people? How did I show up in those moments with God? And then looking at how do I treat myself? So it's really designed around your unique temperament and the things that you more likely need to be looking for at the end of your day. So it's free. And if you don't know your temperament, there is an excellent temperaments quiz that is absolutely free, put out by Metanoia Catholic, that anyone can take.
Okay. All right. So I'll make sure I have a link to that in the show notes so that people can grab that. Um, and so I like to close every episode by asking for some warrior words. So if someone is listening who maybe has those regrets, they said something they shouldn't have said, they did something they shouldn't have done, whether the person they had these words with is alive or not, how would you what would you advise them or what would you say to them?
You know, at the beginning of this episode, or before we pressed record, we talked about keeping it simple. So, as I've prayed about this question, the two words that come to mind again and again are begin again.
Mhm.
And I used to see this as somewhat of a negative. If you've ever taken the Clifton Strengths test, achiever is one of the Clifton Strengths, and it is often described as someone who begins each day at zero. As in, whatever you did the day before, it doesn't matter how good it was, you're going to start today back at zero and you got to earn your way back up, is kind of the mentality of the
Okay.
achiever. But I've started to see this more as a beautiful thing, is I can reset at any moment of any day. What I did before does not define me. It's who do I choose to be in this moment right now? Am I going to choose to cooperate with God's grace? Am I going to begin again? Or am I going to beat myself up about all of the things that I wasn't perfect on? Like, God knows. He knew when He created me all of the mistakes I was going to make. I always go back to Psalm 139, right? He knew all of the things I was going to do, and He chose to create me anyway. So I'm going to choose to just begin again. I'm going to begin again and again and again and again. And that's how we develop resiliency. That's how we grow in holiness. We just begin again with the Lord wherever we are. And even if we had a really great, beautiful day, tomorrow, let's begin again because we know not the day or the hour. And I could have had thousands of great days, but that day with my mom was not a great one. And we
Right.
don't know when that day is going to come. So always begin again.
Wonderful. Oh, that is beautiful. And I think that's going to be easy for some people and it's going to be difficult for others. Yes. But challenge is always a good thing. So Well, thank you, Kylie. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing how it went from something that could have really kept you down to something that you've allowed to lift you up and be open to others, open to helping others. And that is grace in and of itself. I'm tripping over my words. So, but I thank you. I thank you so much for your time, especially during this Thanksgiving week. And you know, the memories are probably more real on or about the anniversaries, and so I appreciate you giving us your time and your vulnerability today.
Thank you so much for having me. It truly is healing to just be able to talk about my mom and to share that experience, not from a place of shame, but just from a place of redemption. The Lord meets us. And, if He can meet me there and He can offer me all that grace, even after the way that I acted, then it's there for all of us. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share my story with you.
Thank you. Begin again. As Kylie shared her warrior words with us, and as I mentioned afterwards, I kept thinking about how easy that is for some of us and how difficult it can be for others. I've often envied people who can quickly put the past behind them and move forward. But I also realize that this can occur in two different ways. People can either process it and then put it in its proper place, or they just ignore it and move on. And I think we can all agree on which way is healthier. I am more of a ruminator, and I tend to analyze the 17 different ways I could have said or did something different. So Kylie's call to begin again has given me something to think about, something I hope everyone listening will do as well. Especially since to begin again helps us be more open to God's graces. It's really difficult to be open when you're busy trying to figure out how you could have done something better, because then the focus is on self and not on God. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe it's important to acknowledge where we went wrong so that we don't keep repeating the same mistakes. But, and this is a challenge to myself as well, don't ruminate on it. We need to take it to God, whether that's in the confessional or through a spiritual director or coach or therapist. And Kylie said that it's part of her job to help mirror back what's really happening, because we're unable to see things ourselves. We're too close to it. And then we also don't see ourselves the way God sees us. She helps people see what's going on so that they can begin again. A skill she may never have leaned into if she had not had the experience with her mother that she did. God used that experience to teach her something about herself, that pride that she admitted she displayed that day. And through her own examination, she has now learned to help others do that as well. What an abundance of grace that is when we are open, when we say yes to what God has asked us to walk through. Now, we may never know this side of heaven, but what if your openness to God's grace helps someone else avoid an experience of pain and heartache? What a blessing you might become to others. Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, Armor up. Fight the good fight. Seek beauty. And make your words warrior words. God bless.